Hey, I'm Kenneth, and I just finished the third Bonk Game Jam. And also, I think that I'm cursed, but I'll explain that in a little bit. If you're not familiar with what a game jam is, it's when you're given a set amount of time to finish a game based on a specific theme. In this case, we had 72 hours to make a game based on the theme of two sides. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you. I am not a big fan of this theme. I really struggled to come up with something that I thought worked very well. The first idea I had was to make some kind of like puzzle platformer where you can flip the world around to its other side to reveal elements and display stuff. But I did a little mock-up of that in one of my previous projects just to see how the effect would look in 2D. And the way I did it, it just looks like you're squishing and stretching. It doesn't actually look like a flip. And I didn't have a good idea for how I wanted to do a flip if it wasn't going to be in a 3D game, which I didn't really want to make. And also, I thought that idea would be super common for the entries just because it was the first thing that came to my mind, so it must be the first thing that comes to a lot of people's mind. And I was right. There were a lot of puzzle platformers where you flip some kind of element to reveal stuff. So then I spent the next 4 to 5 hours just completely unable to come up with anything that I really liked, anything that I could settle on to actually be my game. I had an idea for maybe where you play as a brother and a sister, and it's like a mystery you have to solve, and there are two sides where you have to get his perspective and hers, or maybe like a cooking game where you have to make 2 side dishes to go with an entree. But I couldn't get either of those to really work in my head, and I spent hours trying to figure out something that did work. As a side note, I suffer from severe panic attacks, and my inability to come up with anything in a short time frame caused one. So I had to take a break and step away from my computer. So I came back later after a break to calm down and breathe, and I had an idea that I was happy with. This video will have spoilers for the game I made. So if you haven't played it yet, now is a great time to pause this video, give it a download and give it a try. The game is very good, I think. So give it a try and let me know what you think. I think you'll have fun playing it. I said think like 100 times. But yeah, so when I finally got back to it after wasting hours on my panic attack, I had an idea of doing a 2D platformer very inspired by like the Mega Man X games where you run and you play a little wizard and you shoot your magic blasts. But when you get to the end of the game, instead of having a final boss fight, it's like a bait and switch where you find out that actually the enemies that you've been fighting this whole time aren't like evil bad guys that you should be killing, you know, kind of you're the aggressors in this situation. And then you can go back in time and play the game again, this time specifically not killing any of the enemies, so that you can get to the end and do like a pacifist route. I thought this was a nice play on the theme because you have like the two sides of the war where you have the aggressors and like the innocents that you're murdering, you know, two sides of a conflict, two sides of a story. But then also there are like two sides to the gameplay, you know, sides where you have one playthrough that's violent and one playthrough that's pacifist. It might be a little bit of a stretch. Maybe not everyone's with me there, but I thought it was a good enough take. And at this point I needed to stop panicking and just commit to something and get to work. So I got to it. The first thing I did, and the first thing I always like to do, is draw the main character and get their movement in. Because I think if I have a main character that I like and movement that is fun, then I can make a fun game out of it. You know, there's at least a core concept there. But if I end up with a character I don't like and moving around sucks, then the game can't possibly be good, right? So I pulled up one of my old sprites, a character that I had drawn maybe like 4 or 5 months ago, back when I was brand new to pixel art. And I really, really liked this character sprite. I spent a lot of time trying to get it to look as good as it possibly could, and it was one of the first things I drew. I also tried to animate a run cycle for it, which came out very poorly. At the time, I thought it was pretty good, but I still recognized that it didn't look great. But coming back to it, I see a lot of the flaws with it and a lot of the ways I've improved. So I thought it'd be fun to take this character sprite and redraw the run cycle to see how much I've improved on animating my character so far. So here is the old run cycle, and here is the new run cycle. I also updated the colors, but I think it's obvious just from taking a look at them that I've improved drastically. There's still some problems with the new run cycle that I can identify. The dress is too stiff, and the legs aren't the proper length. They kind of start in the wrong spot, but those are small errors with what I think is a pretty good run cycle versus what used to just be like, yeah, you tried. So I'm pretty proud of that. I've been doing some Udemy courses from Heartbeast. He has one on how to do characters and just pixel art in general, and one specifically for tile sets. And I've almost finished with the first course, and that's how I've improved enough to have this much better run cycle. And the second course I actually followed during the game jam to draw the tile set, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. After I got the character working, I imported it into the game with a basic little platform that I just like drew in a couple seconds that I could run around and jump on, so that the game was there. The game worked. It felt pretty good to run around and jump, and I thought, yeah, definitely can move forward with this. I wasted so much time on the first day of the jam not getting anything done that this was all I got done on the first day, was this character and this basic movement. So I had a lot to get done the next 2 days. I mentioned at the start of this video that I think I'm cursed. Let me explain. So on Friday while I was working, it was pretty hot. It was kind of uncomfortable. Unluckily, my house doesn't have air conditioning, and so when it was kind of hot, I just have to deal with it. Now, this game jam was scheduled for June 25th to June 28th. June 26th to June 28th, are historically the 3 hottest days that the Pacific Northwest have ever experienced. The hottest day in history in Seattle happened on June 28th. I live right in the middle of the Pacific Northwest. On Saturday, when I started working, it was more than 110 degrees in my house. It was so hot. Like, I was melting, you know? I was just sitting there just covered in sweat. I couldn't even think it was so hot. And it is humid too, you know? I was just working in an oven. It was awful. I have a chest freezer in my garage, and I was freezing big buckets of water on cycle and just sitting them next to me in the room just to get some source of cold, I guess. I don't know if it actually helped cool the room down, but I was doing it. Just freezing these buckets of water on cycle just to try to cool myself down a little bit. It was miserable. And my last jam was scheduled 24 hours after I got my second COVID dose. So I was planning on doing the Indie Tales jam when it comes up next weekend. But who knows, man? Maybe I'll get kidnapped. Maybe the moon will fall out of the sky. But anyway, it was really, really hot. I cannot stress to you how hot it was. Anyway, I really had to get down to it and get to work if I wanted to be able to finish this before it was due. So I spent the next couple hours working on the basic functionality. Level loading and transitions, like enemy stand-ins, just a giant red square that could hurt you if you touched it, you know, knockback, the ability to shoot magic and damage enemies and kill them, the ability to pick up power-ups and have it grant abilities to the player, albeit at this time the power-ups didn't have any kind of animations or anything, as well as creating a basic tile set following that tutorial I mentioned earlier, just to get everything set up and the game playable. My plan for the day was to get all that basic functionality set up, then draw the main sprite for the enemies, and then finish by designing however many levels I wanted the game to be in total, so that by the next day, everything was working gameplay-wise, and it was just polish left to make the game as good as it could be. So I finished all that basic functionality stuff and moved on to the enemy. Let me show you some of the work in progress, because I started with doing a block out of what I wanted the basic shape of the enemy to be, and then I just like refined the details and added shading until he finally came together into the enemy you see in the game. And I decided on doing like a giant lamb monster, because I both wanted it to be like intimidating, you know, like a big lamb monster is like, oh, you know, probably want to kill that so it doesn't hurt me. But also I wanted it to be a play on like, you know, bringing lambs to the slaughter. I think that's a saying, right? And I wanted it to be like the symbol of something that doesn't really hurt you. Lambs give that kind of innocent vibe of like, oh, they're not actually, you know, aggressive. But by turning it into a lamb monster, you kind of associate it with being an enemy and are more willing to attack it right away, despite the fact that it's still just a lamb. And that's also why they're called lambs, but without the B. But once I got the basic design of the character, I then animated its walk cycle, and I wanted it to be like more like slow and menacing. And because it's a bigger enemy, you kind of want the walk cycle to feel more big and imposing. And this is definitely something I couldn't have done in the past. I think my pixel art skills have gotten exactly to the level where I could have pulled that off, but I'm really pleased with it, especially because I didn't look up any kind of references or anything for this character or this walk cycle. I did it all from my own imagination, which is a really good feeling, because, you know, everything else I've done so far has been like looking at reference and watching tutorials and following along to be able to draw the things I want to. But this enemy and this walk cycle was just all up here, nowhere else. So that felt pretty good. And then I got those pulled into the game and replaced the red square so that now actually the enemies walk back and forth. And that left designing the levels. So at first I was going to have 10 levels, where the first 5 were using a forest theme and the last 5 were using like a lava underground stone theme to try to give the game a sense of progression. I realized that if I wanted everyone to play the game 2 times, once with a violent run and once with a pacifist run, 10 levels was too many. It's just too many levels. No one's going to play that many in a game jam. So I went with 7 levels instead, so that overall you're playing through 14, and the tutorial level kind of barely counts. So I think it was like a good 5-6 levels of gameplay, of like real gameplay that then gets repeated in a more difficult scenario, since you can't kill the enemies, you have to maneuver past them. So I decided on 7 levels. I was going to go 8, but by the time I finished the 7th level, I was like, that's enough. But I kind of want to walk you through what I was thinking, especially for the tutorial level, because the tutorial level, there's a lot of stuff you could do. Like, I could have just put some arrows on screen and said, hey, press the buttons to move, and you can jump, and oh, those enemies are scary, you better kill them. But I decided against that. 1, because I hate it when games do that to me, and 2, because I thought the design could be a little bit smoother. So let me jump in and walk you through the first level to kind of give you what I was thinking on how this is a tutorial, despite me not telling you what to do. Alright, here's where the level spawns you in. There's no flashing arrows or press the arrow keys to move, because I assume the player is going to try to play the game. When you hit left and right, you can discover you move the character. If you go to the left, you hit this big freaking wall, you can't continue going, so the player learns, hey, go to the right to proceed. You get to the right, you hit this obstacle, the player learns, hey, you're going to need to jump over stuff. Then you get to this point, right? And there's no way that you can make this jump without landing here. So this gives the player a completely risk-free area to learn how to jump over a pit, and also it kind of subconsciously teaches them about the verticality of the level, because there's no way that you can make this jump without saying that, hey, actually there's a floor here. It also kind of teaches you that there is a bottom of the level, because the camera isn't following you any further. So just a few things the player learns from that jump. You get to another scenario. This time there is actually danger, but you cannot make it all the way over here with that jump. So it lets the player know that, hey, there is going to be danger. You can fall to your death. They don't have to die here, but if they do, it shows them that, hey, if you die, it's not that big a deal. You just go back to the start of the level. So try not to mess up, but it's not actually that big of a deal if you do. So then you continue going forward, and now you get your first encounter with an enemy, and this is also in a risk-free environment. Not risk-free, but a much more safe environment, because you have such a height advantage that he's very easy to jump over. And if you don't know what's going on, you just run into him, the knockback almost always puts you on this ledge here, so that you're back to a place of safety to give it another try. You take damage, and this can teach you that you can die to enemies, but it's a very safe area to learn that you should jump over them. And then you continue forward, and now you get to the first and probably only challenge, where this guy's moving much faster than the other one, and you're on the same plane, so it's going to be much tougher to jump over him. But the player can do it, and this is where you teach them that, yeah, no matter what happens, you can jump over enemies. Then you see a floating collectible thingy that you're going to run into, and immediately you get rewarded with the dark magic crystal, which tells you that you can press space to shoot dark magic. There's an enemy right behind you that you just jumped over if you want to try out your new ability. In addition, the only place you can now go is this portal, which teaches you that, hey, make it to the portal to beat the level. Then you get to the second level, and there's no way to jump over this enemy, so it kind of teaches you to use your spacebar to clear the path. You get here, and it teaches you that you can shoot enemies across gaps. Later, it teaches you that you can jump and shoot. Basically, it's just set up the level to encourage the player to play, to do stuff that will teach them the mechanics of the game. It's pretty straightforward, but I just wanted to run through it real fast to kind of make it clear to everyone what I was thinking when I was designing these levels. So that's the basic structure of the level, and one thing I came up with while I was designing this was I hid collectible power-ups throughout the levels, where if you're just playing through as fast as you can, you might miss it, but if you're keeping an eye out and you're really like analyzing, then you'll find these little areas where you can like sneak in and get an extra heart or get an extra jump, you know, those sort of things. And I think those add a whole lot of fun to the game. I mean, personally, I love finding hidden things and little collectibles in games. It feels so good. So I definitely wanted that feeling in the game, especially because I was very inspired by the Mega Man X games where you do find hidden collectibles that make you stronger. So I thought it was an easy fit. And then it adds some variety to the gameplay where rather than just charging forward to get to the next level the whole time, there are moments where you're doing something else, in this case, searching for hidden stuff. And I think adding that dichotomy between the two kinds of gameplay is very important to keep the player engaged for the entire playthrough, especially on the second playthrough. Because during the pacifist run, you're doing the same levels, but trying not to kill the enemies, which is a different challenge, but the levels can feel very samey. But by going through a second time, you can add collectibles that are only available on that second playthrough, so that the player has something to be looking forward to when they're doing that second playthrough. It's not just the same levels, there's new stuff that they can find with the abilities they've gotten previously. So in summary, I think adding those hidden collectibles was a really good idea for the fun of this game. But that does mean that getting a collectible has to feel really good. When the player picks up that collectible, you want them to you want the dopamine centers in their brain to go absolutely bananas because it's like, whoa, this is a cool thing that I got. So that the player feels super rewarded for finding that hidden thing, or feels very rewarded for getting to the end of a level. So that means I really needed to juice up the item collection screen. And I think I did that. I drew a new sprite, which is just the character holding her arms up like, ooh, look, I found a thing. And I think it's a very cute sprite. And I made the collectible sprites so that when you pick them up, it goes above your head like you're holding it. And then I made it so the camera zooms a little bit. Some text pops out that's like, you got the thing. A little jingle plays, like all that stuff to make getting a collectible really big. And I spent a lot of time making sure this felt exactly how I wanted it to. I didn't want to cheap out on the experience of finding those collectibles. I thought that was one of the things about the game that was most fun. And so you really need to take those fun moments of your game and just turn them all the way up to 11 so that the player has that same feeling. So yeah, I spent a long time juicing up that collectible scene and getting it exactly how I wanted. With that done, all I really had left to do was the final cutscene that sends you back in time and being able to tell when you get there whether you have finished the first run or the second pacifist playthrough. And then also, I needed to do all of the polish work, add the particle effects and sound effects and such. So I got to work setting up the cutscene. The dialogue is a little bit ham-fisted. I'm not totally in love with it, but I think it serves the purpose I wanted it to. And I made it during the final day of a game jam, so it's not going to be a literary masterpiece, but I think it does a good job of what it's supposed to do. And one note, I think one thing that I've learned from this game jam and my past one is that making little cutscenes in a game jam takes up way more time than I think it will. It always ends up taking me hours when I think it's going to be like relatively quick. I probably need to set up some kind of just generic cutscene manager node in Godot that I can import into any future projects so that I can avoid all the bugs associated with just like taking over control and running a cutscene. Or I just need to stop making games that require cutscenes like that. One of the two. I do think the cutscenes add a lot to the gameplay. I think it feels pretty good for the player and makes it feel like more of a game, at least to me personally. But I need to come up with a better way of doing it because it's pretty error prone, and also it's probably the worst programming I've ever done in my life. I really hate looking at that file. Someone please erase my eyeballs. But it works. You know, what can you say? For a game jam, as long as it works, you're good. So that leaves the polishing. The first thing that I did was add particle effects everywhere that I thought needed them. When you charge up a shot, it needs to be indicated through particle effects. When you shoot, it needs particle effects. Death particle, I wanted it to look like blood was spraying everywhere so that you got a strong sense of like, ooh, I killed a thing. I thought that that was important for the story to make any sense. If they just like vanish or if it's like a poof or whatever, you don't really get that feeling of like, yes, I did a murder, which is kind of necessary. I even wanted to have it so that when you killed an enemy, it kind of left some blood on the ground. And then if you died and respawned at the start of the level and ran through it again, you would run through like past the blood and see the like carnage that you brought or whatever. But I ran out of time because you only have so much time to make stuff. But yeah, I added particles to when you jump, I added particles to when you die and when you respawn. And then in a similar capacity, I added sound effects to all that stuff. I like to use sound packs for sound effects because I feel like people are better at that than I am. I mean, I would just be using like the beatbox or whatever, BFXR, whatever it's called. I would just be using that and clicking random until something popped up and using it anyway. So might as well let people who are better at it handle it. But I couldn't find any sound effects that worked for like charging up a shot. Nothing sounded good. Nothing was what I wanted. So instead it was just me sitting at my computer at like 2 a.m. on a Sunday, just melting in my chair going into the mic, trying to get it to sound any good at all. I ended up needing to just like distort the crap out of it in Audacity to get it to sound more like charging up magic spell and less like an idiot. But all the sound effects came together pretty well, and that was like everything in the game except for the music. Now I partnered with INSANDIO yet again for this project to handle the music, and I think she deserves a huge shout out for this one because INSANDIO lives in the Pacific Northwest with me. And she also doesn't have air conditioning. So it was also more than 110 degrees for her. When I initially entered the game jam, I contacted her and I was like, hey, do you want to make music for this jam again? And she was like, yeah, sure, sounds fun. But then she let me know on Saturday, she was like, hey, I might not actually be able to sit at my keyboard and play music for this because it's too hot and I can't do it. And then on Sunday at like 2 a.m., you know, like 10 hours before the game was due, I got a message from her on Discord that was like, hey, it's finally cooled down enough where I think I can sit at my keyboard and I have a couple hours where I can try to make something for you. And I was like, that's awesome. And then at 5:17 a.m., I got a Discord notification. I checked it, and INSANDIO had sent me the audio file and the message, I'm Spleepy. And then she immediately went offline, and I didn't hear from her for the next like 10 hours. So she worked really hard in a very short time frame to make an amazing track. It's been playing in the background of this video, but I don't think that does it justice because it's really genius how she set this up. Because she had such a limited time, she couldn't write like a long song, but it's a pretty long game. I had told her that the playthrough was probably going to take anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes at least. And so she knew that she needed a track that wasn't going to get too repetitive. So the way she set it up was that the song has 4 distinct loopable sections. They each sound different. You have the first one, the second one, the third one, and the fourth one. So you can see how each of these sections of the song have a very distinct style to it. They sound way different than the other sections. And then each of those 4 sections can loop cleanly with their own section, or you can play the small transitional piece to move into the next loopable section, which means that in the code, it plays the loopable section, and then it flips a coin, basically. It decides 50-50 chance of looping that section again, or moving on to the transitional piece and doing the same thing for the next piece of the loop, which means that that 1-minute song that she made can play for the whole 20 minutes without getting repetitive at all. It stays varied the whole time you're playing the game so that it never feels repetitive. And it's just brilliant that she set it up like that, considering she didn't have enough time to make like a really long track. It's great work out of her. It sounds great. It matches the game perfectly. Good job. Again, just like last video, I will link all her stuff in the YouTube description. You can find her on SoundCloud, you can find her on YouTube. Now, I spent a little too long working on this devlog, so the results for the game jam have actually already been announced. And boom, here they are. I got 9th place overall. That's sick. It feels really good, especially because game jam ratings are kind of nonsense garbage. I never feel too confident about doing well in a game jam, even if I'm proud of my work. But this one, I feel great. I got 4th place graphics, which again, thanks you to pixel artists. I got 4th place in audio, which thanks INSANDIO. And I got 7th place in gameplay, which I'll take it. I'm really happy with that. I've been working hard to try to make my Game Jam games more fun. I feel like I have good concepts, but I don't execute on them well enough to make them fun in the short period. But, you know, getting 7th place in gameplay feels great. I did very poorly in the theme category. I think a part of this is that some people played but didn't get to the part where you go back in time, so they never saw the part of the game that was related to the theme. Which, I mean, I guess if I didn't capture their interest for that long, sucks. If they don't play to the part where they see how my game meets the theme, understandable, they would give me a 1 star in the theme category. And then also probably some people just thought it was kind of a stretch, and I mean, it kind of was. I didn't really gel with this theme. I didn't get it. I don't understand. 2 sides. How do I do this? What am I doing? Someone help. But getting 9th place in the jam overall feels super good. I'm super happy with it. I think it means that I get to be featured in Bonk's like review of the Game Jam where he lists the top 10 games. I think it does, and that would be sweet. I worked really hard on this and literally melted in my chair to make it. So it feels good to have like some good come out of it. I didn't actually get that many reviews during the Game Jam rating period. I think only 12 people played and reviewed it from the Game Jam. Obviously some of my friends also played it, but not that many people have actually experienced it. So I'd love if you gave it a try. Let me know what you think. I'd love any feedback. I'm always trying to get better at making these games because I want to let people have fun. That's the whole point. That's the whole point of making games, is so that people can have fun playing the games. If you're still watching to this point, you probably liked the video. So if you could hit it with the like button, that would be fantastic. I would really appreciate it. Also, if you wanted to subscribe and see any of my Game Jam devlogs in the future, or if I'm working on any other projects, that would also be swell. And you can leave a comment if you're feeling ever so generous. That's it. That's the end of the video. I don't know how to do that. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I really don't know how to end a video. So let's let my friend, the Plague Doctor, do it for me.
Hey guys, thanks for watching Shovel's video. He worked hard on that game, and I'm very proud of him. Yay! I have a lamp.